Can you guys hear me? Yeah. Okay. All right, I'd like to thank you guys for coming to the first annual Active Minds Speakers Panel for Mental Health and Athletes. I really do appreciate you guys being here. This is an enlightening thing. Hopefully next year we'll have more, because we're going to keep doing this and doing this and doing this until everybody knows. It seems like a never-ending goal, but I believe it can be achieved. If you guys don't know what Active Minds is, we are a student-led organization based around mental health in students, clearly. So we try to relieve the stigma of mental health or mental illness in students. And so what that means is we try to go around and on campuses, we're more than just one chapter. And so when we go to these campuses, we have our, okay, I'm gonna start over. All right. I haven't spoken in a while, so really what we're trying to do is relieve the stigma. Yeah, okay, Johnson County Community. Thank you, Dr. Johnson. So it's talking about mental illness behind closed doors. A lot of people don't want to talk about anxiety, depression, eating disorders, bipolar disorders, all these different things people don't want to talk about in the open. And so we're trying to spread that awareness, saying it's okay to talk about it. It's okay to talk about it in the open. It's okay. Hopefully that way we can relieve stress, relieve all these other issues that go along with it. Aside from that, that's a quick, brief intro to what Active Minds is. Each speaker that's coming up momentarily will give their own story and their brief identity of who they are and what they've gone through as an athlete, and that's what we're here for today. Each athlete, again, they have gone through certain situations, whether it be in high school or college, and they've struggled, and they've overcome, or they're overcoming at the moment. And I'm actually very proud of these people over here because I combed through, I don't know how many athletes that either didn't want to talk about it, or they felt uncomfortable because they didn't maybe feel like they were strong enough to talk about it. I'm just so glad to have these people here, so I can't even thank you guys enough just starting off. Okay, and the reason I picked student athletes, I wanted to talk about student athletes, is because athletes are seen as this ideal, this titan, this almost godlike creature that people look at and see them almost like they're untouchable, right? And at least that's how I view them. I used to view them. That they're not people, that they're these things. And they don't have feelings, they just keep pushing through, they have no weaknesses, and that is just not true, because I was an athlete in high school, and I struggled with things, and I found that out pretty quickly once I got into high school. These athletes, though, they've gone through so much more, and it's comparing apples and oranges, and that's just not fair, but I feel like these athletes are just on a different level. They go through things, just like everybody else. So I'm glad you guys are here to open up the mind already. I have a question for you guys. How many of you guys are KU fans? You can raise your hand. All right, how many of you found that Elijah Johnson is a bad word, you can no longer talk about him in your household or with friends? You guys may scoff at it, I'm sure. You guys had probably a lot of rips on him right after the game. The reason I bring that up is because as an athlete, a student athlete, he's 22 years old, by the way. There's a lot of criticism. Initially, I'm not gonna lie. I was very frustrated, and I was like, why would you make that pass, right? And it run a lot of things running through my mind. And I just looked at the social media, and it just exploded with how many people hated him, how many death threats were gonna come out again, all these bad things. And putting that much weight on a student athlete, 22 years old, I'm not going to stand up for him because, I am, I guess, but I'm just going to stop talking right now. Okay, I'm going to introduce our first guest.
Josh,
yes.
Just bring the whole panel.
Okay, yeah, I'm going to introduce you guys, and then you guys just come up one at a time and have a seat. Yeah. All right. Our first guest is Sandra Duvier. She'll be talking first. And then our second guest will be Kendall McDougall. And our third guest will be Arbon Baker. And then enlightening through the experiences that he's had, as an athlete as well as being a sports psychologist will be Dr. Murphy. All right, Sandra is a sophomore who came out of Wichita from a prep academy, and she had injuries sustained to her hand and a concussion towards the end of the year, and she'll be going over and talking about what she dealt with and how she overcame that.
Okay, hi, my name is Sandra. I'm actually a redshirt freshman, because I redshirted this past year because of the injuries I had. On the first day of practice, I got a concussion thanks to my twin. And after that, I was recovering from that, and then right after that happened, I had IT band. It's in by your knee or whatever, and I don't know what caused it. We still don't know, but that caused, I couldn't run on my foot. I couldn't really stand on it. It hurt to stand. So because of that, I had to sit out, and I got a medical, or in the process of trying to get a medical red shirt. But just to like sum up what Josh said, he put it really well about people thinking athletes are superior and that we don't go through a lot of stuff. And for me, like I look at other athletes and I view them that way too. But the truth is we're all human. It's just a matter of we have faced different trials than what other people do. And my trials were definitely this year. And the main thing with me is I'm very competitive, so I put a lot of pressure on myself, especially coming out of high school. There's a lot of pressure to play as a freshman, and when I haven't seen those setbacks and not being able to play, that was really, really hard for me. And I didn't take it in the best way, I guess. I started to pity myself a little bit. I doubted myself. I just not depression, but I mean I was just very into myself, and I kind of withdrew from other people. I didn't want to talk about it. I just wanted, I don't know, being in it about, I guess. I didn't handle it very well. But one thing that really helped was, I talked to our coach. One of the assistant coaches really helped pull me through. My dad offered a lot of advice, and one of the things that really got me through is he showed me a verse, and it's Psalm 46 verse 1, and it says, "God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble." And that for me was just like, wow, if nothing else, I have God. He's going to help me pull me through. And even the biggest thing was I felt like I had failed. I failed my team, I'd failed my coaches, I failed myself and my family. And the truth is you don't fail until you give up. And I was starting to give up. So I realized that I hadn't failed anything if I just wanted to come back and make it better. So it really, so once I guess, that's pretty much the sum of it. I guess what I want to say is just that it's really hard for athletes. I think the biggest thing is because we put a lot of pressure on ourselves more than necessary sometimes. And so then when we do face setbacks or injuries or something like that, that really, it's devastating unless you know how to handle with it. So I've definitely learned how to handle that, I guess. That's my story.
Thank you, Sandra. As she said, each person has a way of dealing with things, some more healthy than others. Some people use, like she said, she used religion, God, to help her get through things. She, is a positive influence in a way. Some people, some athletes will go use drugs, like a lot of college athletes I've seen and I've read about. But that's one positive way to go about it. And I'm going to move on to our next speaker, who is Kendall McDougall.
I came here at Johnson County to play basketball, and let's see, My story is kind of a process. It built up over time. Well, first off, I pretty much am done playing basketball. And I'll tell you a little bit about what brought me to that decision. I've been playing since I was like 4 or 5. I mean, it was a very family-oriented activity. My dad he was my fan, he was my coach, and I was his manager for when he was a high school coach. And our whole family was involved. We all go to MUIB and do all sorts of things growing up, and I enjoyed it at the time. I loved it. I met new people. I got to travel, and there was definitely a lot of positive things because I learned. It taught me a lot. It taught me how, it gave me a good work ethic, and learned how to work with others. And when we moved to Olpe High School, probably none of you have heard about it, but it's a really small town outside of Emporia. I had 27 kids in my graduating class, and Olpe was really known for basketball and sports in general. And so I was excited and nervous, because I'd been playing so long, and I wanted to still bring success to the team and what was tradition at Olpe. And when we got there, I enjoyed it. I didn't think anything of it. I thought it was going to be something I wanted to do because I had such a great time. I had great teammates, and we had 2 state championships. We were very successful. And then junior year is kind of when this starts. First off, I was kind of stressed in general because I had, on top of basketball, I was doing lots of other extracurricular activities because I wanted to be well-rounded and do lots of other things, and I couldn't say no to activities and doing things like that. So, but since I was already kind of stressed, and I know junior year is a big recruiting year for college athletics, at least so I was told. So I was always worried about that because when I was an underclassman, I didn't think anything of it. I'm like, oh, I'll put it off, and part of me was annoyed. I'm like, I don't want to worry about that when I got 2 more years. I want to enjoy high school. So when junior year come, I started thinking about college sports and what I was going to do. And then my mom tells me that, right before school started, that she was going to divorce my dad. And, I'm not looking for a sob story. This is pretty, divorce is common, but it was hard for me to wrap my head around that because I couldn't talk to anybody. She didn't want to tell my sisters, and I didn't want to tell them. And I withdrew from a lot of my friends, and I didn't have, I lost some friends that way by not, talking with them and hanging out and things. And then when my coach found out, because I hadn't been playing as well, because there's so much going on in my mind, I didn't know how to just let it go and to just play and do something that I've been doing since I was like 5 years old. So coach kind of finally pulls me aside and is like, Mac, what's going on? Because he's been my coach since 8th grade. And I was sitting in his office, and I just finally let it all out. And he's like, you need to use it as an out. You need to use basketball as an outlet, if anything else, because you got so much going on for you. I mean, this is, if you're still struggling on how to deal with it, try using basketball. And at the time, I was like, how can I use basketball as an outlet when it was something that was so family oriented? Because my whole family was involved in basketball. So I still struggled with that, and I felt like I was failing because I put so much pressure on myself to perform well, and I didn't think I'd play well at any games I played. And then I felt even more so like that when senior came, and my offers, to play college ball kind of dropped. I only like 2 or 3, and I visited. Until Coach Conrad called, and at first I was like, I want to get out of the state. I kind of want to get away from family, get away from everything else going on. And at first I was like, I didn't want to go to a junior college, and I visited a school in Colorado and kind of looked around, but finally got another coach called me again, and you know what, and I was like, I couldn't think of anything else, and I was like, I've been on a visit here, and I was like, all right, we'll try it at a junior college, and I can kind of see if I still want to do basketball after 2 years. And of course I was still thinking, yeah, you better do it because you got to pay for school. That's why you're playing basketball in the first place. And so I get here, and of course, junior year, I'd also, other than dealing with the emotional drama with my family, I was having some physical injuries. I've had 2 concussions in basketball, and a hyperextended knee, and then my back started giving me a lot of issues. So, and then it didn't really start. It escalated summer workouts. The first summer basketball game we had, I rolled my ankle really bad. So I'm like, this is probably not a good start to college basketball. So And then when we started really hitting the floor at the preseason workouts, I couldn't even finish a sprint. My back would just ache, and we still don't know what's wrong with it. And it was probably the most humiliating moment of my life, not being able to finish a sprint. When I was always one of the first to finish sprints. I was always, one of the quickest on the team in high school, and so that was very humiliating, and I felt like I was just failing at everything because I couldn't even do what I've been doing. And so I redshirted because we didn't know what was wrong, and as I'm sitting there on the sidelines, I'm just kind of helping out. It's a moment of clarity. I'm like, I don't really miss this. Like, if you're so dedicated to it as much as I was, and I thought I was, I'd be like working so hard to get back in the game and to playing, but part of me is just like, what's the point? Like, part of me was probably burnout, and I didn't want to fight myself when I didn't know what was wrong with me physically. So I talked to Coach about Thanksgiving, and I'm like, Coach, I don't think this is what I want to do anymore. And he's like, I kind of thought about that. You're very well-rounded when I was recruiting you, but he still offered me to stay on as manager. Just shows you how great of a person he was, along with being a coach. So I stayed on and went through that. But I'm still there'll be times, because I still love the team and I wanted to be a part of them. They were such a great program, and I had a great time and learned a lot. But I'm still kind of working on, it's done. I'm doing new things now, lots of different things on campus, but it's still kind of a work in progress for me. I can say that, I was ready to move on, but there's still, when it's so ingrained into your system, it's hard to just up and let it go like I thought I had. So, especially, at the end of the season with the team, and like I've been there in that situation before, so it's still kind of working on that, but I wouldn't trade anything because, it brought me here to JUCO, and I love the school, so yeah, I guess I'm still kind of working on it, trying to figure out my next move. So.
Okay, thank you, Kendall. As she said, there are other outside influences that occur, that happen to affect how we play on the court, and how she thought about herself and how she thought she could succeed. Ultimately, she started to overcome that, so it's a great thing that you're here. I used to work with, a little background on me, I used to work with the girls team a year or two ago, and I'd go down to the trainers to get some tape or something, and oftentimes I'd see, it would usually be full of all these athletes that were getting stuff that were prepped on their legs, prepped on their arms, on their shoulders, wherever it may be, their injury or strain or something that was going on with them. And these athletes, they weren't at 100% full to their body capacity. Like they weren't able to, go out there without any bandages or anything. And that was something in itself. It was a physical thing that they couldn't compete maybe without a brace or something of that nature, pre-wrap around the knee. That's kind of like a mental thing in itself. So it really puts down an athlete, I guess, in a way that maybe, I don't know if you guys ever dealt with that, or maybe putting something on that you kind of look at yourself and you have to think about that you have to put this on in order to compete without hurting yourself. And so mentally it's straining, it can be. And so I think Arvon might be able to shed a little bit more light on that. ACL tear is what he'll be talking about, and how he's gone through that and dealt with it. So this is Arvon Baker.
Well, when he asked me to do this, I was pretty happy because I knew that I could finally just say what the stuff that happened with me. And before all of it happened to me, I just think of myself, coming out of high school and stuff. I was a real shallow guy, naive, and just weak-minded through all that I was going through. But through all of this, I just grew as a person. I would think, and it started with me when I was a freshman in high school, and I tore my ACL, but I kept playing on the injury because I didn't have insurance. So my sophomore year in my junior year, like I played with a torn ACL, but I would slow down sometimes, and sometimes I felt pain, but I just kept playing. And my senior year came, and I had a good season. I was on a really good team, and I just became consumed with just love from fans and just glory from other people, and that was turning into my only drive of why I played, just playing for fans and just respect and trying to be someone just popular and just shallow person, and it was all I cared about. Just that was everything. And I'm from Florida, so when I kept going far away to play basketball, that sort of topped it off, and a lot of people kept in touch with me and supported me. And that's usually what people do if they think that you're going to be successful. And it was a tough adjustment coming to Kansas because it was a culture shock, and JUCO basketball isn't what it is where I live at. And when I first was getting recruited, this school had won national championships and stuff, and it was the coaches, they was real supportive. And it, of course, it's gonna change when you get to the school because it's a job for them. So it really wasn't the same, but I just started to adjust as best as I could. So on the first day, on the scrimmage with my own team, on the second play, I hurt my knee, and I had to sit down, and I was mad. I didn't know why God would let that happen, but I realized everything happened for a reason, and my knee was swollen, and 2 days later, conditioning started, and it was real rigorous workouts that I already wasn't used to because I was in high school last year, so the workouts aren't as hard as they are in college. And plus my injury that I was going through, the pain was really excruciating, but I kept going through it because I just wanted to play. I wanted to play. So I played in all the scrimmage games, and I was playing good. I was playing all right, and I ended up hurting myself again, and I could barely walk. It was hurting to walk, so I got an MRI, and the doctor said that there was nothing in my knee but swelling, everything was broken. I needed a reconstruction, and at the time I was sad a little bit, but I was relieved because all the pain would be gone. It hurt when I would sleep, just when I would walk, I was just always in pain. So when I was playing, it's a lot of cutting, a lot of jumping, defensive slides, lifting weights, doing squats. It hurted. So, and they wanted me back soon, so they scheduled a quick surgery, probably to get in within 2 weeks. And they said living on our own, we just live with our own teammates, so it was gonna be hard, but I didn't really understand that at the time. I was just it's all right, I'll do it. And so I was okay. And the surgery came, and just day by day I started to go down. I put my self-worth and how good I thought I was in basketball, and I couldn't even walk. So how could I claim to be good in basketball if I can't even walk? I definitely can't jump. I definitely can't run. I just felt that I didn't have nothing, and the people back home that used to support me, they wasn't hearing about how I was doing good or anything, so they weren't checking for me anymore, just calling to see how I was doing, and just being how it used to be. And when I was immature, I was mad. I said it was fake or they forgot about me. But as I got older, I realized everybody has to live for them, and anything that they said good about me or thought about me, it was just a blessing, and everything else is how it should be, and just expect it because we are equal, and some people get at different things, and it just is, that's just how it is. And I was on a lot of pills. I really wouldn't ask no one to bring me anything or anything, so sometimes I'd be crawling to the kitchen, or because I couldn't use my crutches and grab stuff, so I just lost my identity, and I started to gain weight and just feel bad about myself and I was at an all-time low. Like, I had real close friends, and I just stopped talking to them completely. Like, it wasn't a gradual thing. Like, people could call me or text me. I wouldn't text back. I would see people I knew. I wouldn't say nothing. I was mad at everybody because I was mad at myself. I lost a lot of confidence as a person. I was just mad, and I blamed everybody. And I just wanted to drop everything and go back home, but it was the middle of the year, my credits would have got messed up, and I would have been a failure and a quitter besides everything else that was going on with me. And it came to a point, I just started walking down. I didn't look people in the eye anymore. I was real insecure about myself. And one night, I had some homework to do, so I skipped to my room, couldn't use the crutches because I had to grab my laptop, and I didn't have balance. So I dropped my laptop, and the screen broke, and like that just like sort of blew it off. So I just was punching walls, and I just thought to myself, like, if I were to die right now, that I wouldn't have to just be worrying about the stuff I was worrying about, from like my armpits hurting to being on crutches all day, my hands hurting, the pain I was in on my leg, couldn't sleep. And I mean, that's just stuff we have to go through. And people would see me change and not being how I used to be, but I would just brush the questions off and say I was all right. But it was so much aggression in me, I just continued to pray. And I eventually apologized to all the people I hurt, all the friends I stopped talking to, and stuff like that. And I just said, and it was just one day that came, and I just said, tomorrow I'm gonna go to the weight room, I'm gonna get back in shape, I'm gonna go to rehab, I'm gonna try as best as I can, and I'm gonna just work on the things in basketball that I can work on, and just started praying and staying strong. And I met a guy out here. It was something he always talked about, good to good. He didn't play sports or anything. It was just a guy I met in class, and we started hanging out, and he was a real good guy, and he just talked about a way of living, and it's called Good to Good, and just trying to find a positive in everything and that I do or any situation that affects me. And I grew from the test that I was faced with, from getting a surgery, not being able to play. And I just feel like just somewhat of a warrior, and I still have depressing days because I'm not all the way back. I can't play. It's hard to watch basketball and just imagine myself doing it. But I feel like with God, I can overcome all things, and I'm still going to continue to do my rehab and play basketball and see where it takes me. And I just feel like, I know it was a lot of different people that came today. I don't know if they was going through depression and stuff, but I feel like the tests we face as humans, like depression or suicidal thoughts, I feel like it's all just tests, and God is just making all of us stronger by allowing us to overcome them. And sometimes we may look at people and say, I don't know if I could live like that, or I don't see how they do it. But as people, we learn how to adapt to any situation as long as we don't give up, as in committing suicide or giving up. And even from living with a disease, you might wonder how people can do that with one leg, or that's what we all wonder, and or a homeless person, and we all just adapt. And that's the one gift that God gave us all. So I believe in mind over matter, and that we all can just overcome any situation if we try. So that's all.
Thank you, Arvon. That was something I only heard a little bit of his story, so it's really impressive to hear all that. As he was talking about their pressures that come from up above, and a lot of times they don't want to talk about it, but coaches, I know, because I've talked to athletes, and coaches can be a big influence, whether it be positive or negative, and whether to get back on the court faster because they're losing out on an asset, and it makes them try to push themselves harder, and they can re-injure themselves. There's other negative things that can happen, and so from where Arvon's coming from, understand. So, Dr. Murphy, sorry, I'm blanking out. Dr. Murphy will be our next speaker. He'll be enlightening us on some of the things that they were talking about and some of the things he's talked to student athletes and everything he's gone through.
Thank you. I want to stand, talk. And I listened to our speakers here, and I've heard similar comments almost the past 20 years. And one of the things that happens in sports, and first of all, we have to realize what sports is. Sports is a billion-dollar business. And the filters, it permeates society, and it goes down. I started playing football when I was in the 4th grade. And for me, playing sports, in essence, saved my life, because if I didn't play sports, I would probably be in jail. I used to live over on 16th and Truce, which was at that time everything in the world went on. And my involvement in sports prevented me from being involved in other things that you do on the streets, belonging to a game. So I put a lot into sports. I enjoyed it, I liked it, and so I excelled to a certain extent. And I played ball in high school. I have 6 brothers, and they were involved in sports. I kind of, since I was the oldest, I paved the way for them. My father came from Arkansas, and he only went to the 3rd grade, and he didn't understand sports. He thought it was that it was a waste of time. So I had to convince my mom to convince him to let me play sports. And he saw that, well, he took me off the street, so therefore he said, go ahead. And I got involved in sports. It helped me to gain self-discipline. It helped me to look at the team aspect of it. And so I did that in high school, and I decided that I wanted to be a coach. If you wanted to be a coach, you had to become a teacher. And so at that time, it was a dilemma for me, because from 4th grade throughout high school, I had another problem, and that was I couldn't talk. I had an acute stuttering problem. It took me a minute to say Robert. And so I kept thinking, I love this sport. I want to be a coach, but I have to be a teacher. How can that happen when I can't talk? And so I went through this, and we're talking about mental impact, mental things. And so I started early seeing something that I wanted, which many athletes do. And so you go for something, and I wondered, how can I become a coach and I can't talk? And one of my little miracles is that by the time I was a senior, I didn't stutter. I stopped stuttering. I call it a miracle. And people thought I stuttered. Because I stuttered, they thought I was mentally retarded. They didn't make that distinction. And so people, my peers I grew up with, they kind of like, oh, Robert, because I couldn't talk. But when I started playing sports, I could run fast. And I finally realized that one of my assets was I could run fast. So I got into football and track. And I went through that whole process of being involved in sports. And then when I got out of high school, then I wanted to go on to college. I also, when I played ball in high school, also was involved in the Golden Gloves. And I was pretty good because I went on to Chicago and boxed. So here I was looking at the whole world of sports as an avenue out of the ghetto, as an avenue to go on. And the problem with sports is that it puts us on a pedestal. All athletes, it puts you on a pedestal. in every sports. But what doesn't occur is that how do you come down from the pedestal? Or I refer to how do you, when you fall off the pedestal. And I think every athlete will, because of the nature of it. That no athlete will stay the same. You will have to retire. We see this in pro sports, we see this in high school, and you may come off the pedestal because you might get hurt. Or Vaughn talked about the impact of being an athlete who's hurt. Several of our other speakers talked about being hurt. And so athletes fall off the pedestal. And the problem is no one is addressing that. You know, you don't see many coaches, you don't see many people talking about what happens when you fall from the pedestal. I talk about that a lot because I think the sports mirrors life and that we all have peaks and valleys. How do we cope with that? And because we don't cope effectively, then that's why we begin to impact mental problems. And I find it very interesting that sports, you know, and I learned to love sports and to become involved in sports. And I think it's very necessary because all athletes are put on a pedestal, but no one or few people talk about how can you make that transition from being on a pedestal to being normal. Or I want to talk about when you're hurt physically, you were hurt mentally. But many do not address those. If you are a great star, then maybe they may begin to address that. I'm wondering, did anyone see this program? It's called, I believe it's called 30 and 30, and they've talked about different athletes. And one of the athletes they talked about was Marcus Russell, quarterback who played for the Oakland Raiders, and he was at the top. Got a lot of money and played ball, and then he failed, and it was a hard fall. So now he's trying to come back. And athletes, all athletes will have to come back to a certain extent because you are going to fall. And one of my criticisms about sports is that they don't tell athletes from the outset that yes, you want to be great and you strive to do that, but at some point, you're not going to be great. Or, you know, and for example, when you were in high school and you may be playing in a C division or a D division because it's a smaller school, but you're one of the best. You're one of the best in that division, A, B, C, or whatever. You come to college and you think you're great, but you may not make the team, or if you make the team, you don't play very much. What's happening to those individuals that have to go through that? And then once they do, how are you going to cope? And that leads to other kinds of problems. So I believe that if you're put on a pedestal, then you ought to be informed as to how you can come down from the pedestal. Because trying to come down, and some never do. Some come down, but they never adjust to it. You can look at the lives of a number of professional athletes, and their life, you know, is impacted tremendously because no one really told them how to effectively and efficiently come down from the pedestal. You know, and one can come down. There are some athletes out there who show us the way, but not enough people are informed about what I call the fall from the pedestal, the fall to come to be able to live life effectively. And we have all kinds of examples of athletes who are running into all kinds of problems, who end up in jail, who end up, you know, these are nightmares. And part of it is because, or I should say a big part of it is because no one tells us how to make that transition. And so I believe that we ought to begin to do more to help athletes so they can live what we call a normal life, so that they can enjoy athletics, which you do, But how can you, when you come down from it, you should be able to live a normal life. And I heard speaker talked about how, people they couldn't talk to, they wanted to talk to. And one of my personal experience, I had one of my brothers who played ball. In fact, he was the best athlete in our family. I come from a family of 12, 7 boys, 5 girls, and we played sports. And one of my brothers who went to school in Missouri, senior year, he was the top scorer in the state of Missouri, averaged 27 points a game. He was recruited by over 40 or 50 schools. I happened to go around with him to these schools, and that's a very interesting when you do that. You go down and you are recruited by many schools and what they look for. And we went through that process, and my brother finally selected a school, which was Notre Dame. And we went there, and he had a fairly good career there. He ended up, and a lot of people don't know, he was recruited by the Boston Celtics, and he went to camp and busted his knee. And for him at that time, he thought life was over. And I continued to tell him that there is and he heard me say this often, and then some of the athletes that I've dealt with heard me say, there is a day after ball. There is a day after ball. Which meaning that at some point, if you are involved in athletics, that day is going to come when you're no longer going to do that. And when that occurs, where will you be? What kind of situation will you be in? That's going to be contingent on, how you approach it. If you're a student athlete, there's 2 parts, student and athlete. And you have to be a student, because that day comes after ball. And I've seen a lot of athletes who play ball, even in major institutions, and they end up on the street. They end up with no degree. They end up being impacted mentally, psychologically. And there are hundreds of those individuals. And so I'm saying that one of the things we have to do is to prepare for that day after ball. If you are a student, then be a student, get your degree. And not only get a degree, but get knowledge and skills so that you will be able to go on after being involved in a sport. And we don't talk enough about that. Because if we did, then we would not have, I think, the mental problems that we see and we experience. And so we have to start early. We have all these little leaguers, and we are always pushing them to be on the top, get on the pedestal. But how are we going to get them down from the pedestal and say, yes, that's a natural kind of, if you're up, you're down. Man told me a long time ago, people say he's crazy, but he told me, he said, look, once you're up, you're going to come down. And in sports, we have to begin to do that, to see how, because if we do this, then our athletes will become more effective. They will become more men and women who can live in society and who can be better citizens. Because I think sports is a good experience. Well, let me qualify that. It can be. It can be. Because it teaches us to how to deal with when you fail. You go to a game and you lose. Well, do you fall apart? Do you quit? No. You can learn how to deal with life. And life consists of peaks and valleys. And we all go through peaks and valleys in our lives, but how do we do that effectively? When we do not do that effectively, then here's where we impact, here's where problems comes in. Psychological, mental problems. And I submit that if we do a better job of the transition from the pedestal to normal life, then we will be in a better position to deal with the issues that comes up. You know, how to deal with physical pain, how to deal with psychological pain. And so these are issues that we do not address, and in my life, I tried to do that. You know, I'm a counselor here, but outside of here, I'm a psychologist, and I deal with people. And I deal with, you know, I have a nephew now who probably will be very fast. He's very fast. I ran the 100-yard dash once and then he's faster than I ever will be. But I tell him, how are you going to deal with the pedestal? So I'm not sure how much time we have, but we can begin to ask some questions, or I can talk about other aspects.
No, I wanted to speak.
Okay.
Hi, I'd like to thank you all for coming. I'm Susie Simpson, and I'm the faculty advisor for Active Minds at JCCC. And we've heard a lot about people how they deal with their illnesses and how they deal with you know, stopping playing or being let down if something happens. But that's only one side of mental health in athletes. There's also mental health that is there even though they're an athlete, or in addition to them being an athlete. And I think that it's important to understand that a lot of the people who are going out for athletics and who are really striving to be an athlete, oftentimes it's not really their true goal. Sometimes they're getting pressure from a parent, or sometimes they think that's their only option and that's, you know, their way to get ahead. But other times they enjoy the sport, everything's fine. But because they're an athlete, people look up to them and expect them to be strong and to behave a certain way and to believe certain things. You know, they're athletes. They get up in the morning and go practice before school. They stay after school and go to practice. They still have to do their homework. They have to go away, miss classes, to go to games and stuff. So that does put a lot of stress on them. And for college students, one of the most stressful times in your life is starting college. Aaron Beck, who is a noted depression researcher, said that college students are especially prone to many of the things that lead to depression, because you are experiencing all these major changes in your life simultaneously. You're often moving away from home. As you spoke, you may have been a star in your high school, and now you're one of many talented athletes at your college. You might not make the team, or you do make the team. But all these other things are going on. You've lost your social support. You no longer are living at home with the normal surroundings that you're used to. You may not know people. You have maybe all of your friends went somewhere else. And all of these things, maybe it's the first time you've been on your own. So you're dealing with loneliness. You're dealing with perhaps feeling like maybe you're not cut out for this. And oftentimes you start thinking negatively. Now, if you're an athlete, you keep it to yourself. It's not okay to talk about it because you're an athlete. You're not supposed to be feeling that way. You know what? You don't want to get off the team. So how do you deal with it? That's the problem that we really need to address, and that's what Active Minds is all about. We want to change the conversation about mental illness. We want to make it okay to talk about it. We want it, I noticed when you were talking, you were describing all the symptoms of depression, and yet you were very quick to say, I wasn't depressed or anything. And it's the labels. The reasons that happens is because we feel that there's a stigma that goes along with acknowledging things. And as long as we have this silence and we don't make it okay to talk about it, then the stigma grows. In college, 1 in 4 college students has a diagnosable mental health issue. 1 in 4. That's a lot. And just because you're an athlete doesn't mean that you are immune to those things. In fact, oftentimes you're dealing with more stress, more expectations. You have a support system, but it might not be a support system that you're comfortable talking about those kind of things. You don't want to appear weak. And I have to admit, I'm disappointed by the attendance. I thought we were having the athletic teams, coaches, and the athletes here to kind of gain more from this. But it is okay to ask for help. And it is okay to say, you know, I just don't know what I want to be doing, or I'm confused, or I'm, you know, anxious. It's even okay to say, you know, I'm dealing with an eating issue because I have to make weight for wrestling, or, you know, I have to get slim enough to be good in gymnastics. All of these are psychological issues that can have long-term effects. And as we saw last year, we lost one of our student athletes. They took their own life because they didn't reach out and ask for help. So a big part of this, the reason I was supporting this whole thing, is to make it clear that mental health issues are very, very treatable. There is help. And if we talk about it, if we acknowledge, if we say, hey, it's okay, then people will reach out and get the help they need. And they won't feel so distressed about telling people. Unfortunately, in our society, with what has been happening, all the attention that has been paid to these very, very, very rare instances of somebody going in and killing people, massacring people, this thing that happens extremely seldomly, that is an outlier in terms of how many people it affects, in terms of student death, gets so much attention and is talked about, and you cannot turn around without reading about it ad nauseum, over and over and over. You start to believe that that's the norm, that that's the danger. Well, 1,100 college students commit suicide every single year. That's not an outlier. That's much more prevalent. And that's something that we can affect. And the first step to take to doing that is making it okay to talk about mental health issues. Making it okay to say, hey man, I'm depressed, I need somebody to talk to, where do I go? Just last week we screened, we had mental health screening, and within like 10 minutes, I mean it rained, we had terrible conditions, so we didn't get near the crowd we were expecting. But in 10 minutes, 4 people were identified as in need of psychological help. The screening diagnosed them as being clinically depressed or suffering from a clinical diagnosis of anxiety disorder or even PTSD. So hopefully, as these kind of events grow, we can bring more and more attention to the fact that just because you're an athlete doesn't mean that you are immune from things that affect everybody. And when you're dealing with these things, whether you're an athlete or not, it's okay to ask for help. And yes, oftentimes, people who have their whole life set on becoming that star, playing professionally, we know the percentage of people that comes true for. And I agree wholeheartedly that we need to focus so much more on having them be a good student, having them understand that they have a life outside of athletics, and teaching them that, you know, that's just one aspect of who they are. Athletes can be an amazing outlet for people who are depressed. It can be an amazing outlet to work off excess energy, anxiety. It can be an amazing source of sublimation where we're exerting some of less acceptable energies into. But in the end, it is something that can also make you feel like you have to behave a certain way when you really don't have the capacity to do that. So I'm hoping the athletes that are here will go back and talk to their teams and their coaches and maybe chide them a little for not being here and bringing your teammates. And thank you very much, Zoe, and our softball, women's softball team representatives who came. They're both my students, so most of the people here today are my students. So thank you for coming and listening. Thank you guys so much for sharing your stories. If you have any questions, please feel free to talk about that. And thank you so much for coming down, and I know you're busy this time of year.
Okay, if there's anybody that has questions, you can feel free to, raise your hand, do whatever. You're free, feel free to ask any of them questions as long as it's, if they're comfortable answering it, they'll answer it. Dr. Murphy, do you have a comment or anything?
Well, I'm glad to see that there are some students and other people here to even address the whole issue of sports. And I think that's the start, that you heard something, then you go back and then continue to raise the issue so that it can be addressed. If there are no people, then they're not looking at the issue. So I would say continue to be involved.
I just want to thank people for sharing the story, and I agree that the good things that come from this have to have a start in the beginning, and it may be smaller than anticipated, but it could get a lot bigger than imagined. So, thanks for sharing.
Again, I'd like to thank all of you guys for being here. Dr. Murphy was a last minute kind of thing, and our three student athletes. This is so important that they decided to speak. And again, I had a tough time trying to find speakers that were willing to. Or I talked to some of the coaches, and they say yes, and then kind of not talk about it to their athletes or student athletes. So it was frustrating, but. These three, I'm just so excited and glad that you guys decided to share your stories. And
Think about our club, joining our group.
so
Active Minds at JCCC.
I appreciate you guys, and Dr. Murphy, I thank you for being here. Thank you guys, everybody, for being here, and I hope to see you next year. About the same time, we'll put out this a little bit better, and probably better MC next year, right? Okay. So,
You did great.
thank you.